Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Sally Burnett. Our top stories. What a week on Wall Street. More positive economic data allays fears of recession, but the housing sector still looks shaky.
Our other headlines, a Kremlin aide accuses NATO and the West of helping to plan Ukraine's Kursk incursion as Russia's offensive in Donetsk intensifies.
A pause in peace talks. Washington offers a revised ceasefire plan for Gaza, with negotiators saying they will meet again next week.
And Europe raises the alert level on Mpox, urging travellers to consider vaccinations as the virus spreads across continents. Stocks on Wall Street are flat after a rather volatile week. That's after housing data showed a sharp drop in United States building activity in July.
But it comes at the end of a week of more positive economic news that's allayed fears of a recession. Let's speak now to our correspondent, John Terrett, in New York. Hello, John. Happy Friday. Yeah. It's been quite the week on Wall Street.
Hello, Sally. Happy Friday.
Walk us through the highs and the lows of the past week.
WAWOWS. I do a little feature every week for our Washington, D.C. colleagues, and it stands for What a Week on Wall Street. And, you know, the funny thing is, it always is. Every week there's something that you can attach that little sort of saying to, really. And, of course, the thing is that this week has been an absolute head spinner. And it could have been worse than it turned out to be, fortunately, because we had three key pieces of data that we were anxiously awaiting for, all of them pertinent to inflation and interest rates and the Federal Reserve. Now, the first one came up on Tuesday, and this was PPI, which is inflation paid by people who make the things that go on to the shops that we then buy. So this is wholesale inflation. And it fell again, second month in a row. So that was a good start. And then on Wednesday, we had CPI, which is the sexier consumer price index. This is inflation paid by people here in the stores and the gas stations and in the service sector. And the headline there was that it fell below 3% for the first time since March 2021. So that's very, very good. And then we had retail sales on Thursday. All of this is very similar stuff. On Thursday, retail sales came in, and we were expecting it to be ahead by 0.3%. And it turned out to be up by 1%, very much more so than anybody had anticipated. And then you add to that the world's biggest shop, Walmart, which is big in terms of the people it employs, the stuff it sells, the size of its stores, the size of its car parks. It's just absolutely enormous. And Wall Street really moves markets. Walmart does. And it said in the notes that accompany the print of its latest set of earnings that it sees no fraying in customer finances. And it boosted its guidance for revenue for the whole year. And they say that what they're doing is getting a lot of volume, a lot of footfall, as it's called, through the doors, and people are spending more. And these people are well off, and they are lower income people. Now, traditionally, Walmart appeals to lower income people, but they say a lot of richer people are going in. So is this a sign of a slowing economy? It's kind of tough to know, but the thing is, Walmart is doing what none of the other stores seem to be doing. They're increasing the volume. So anyway, all of this just reassured Wall Street that there is no sign at the moment of a slowdown or a recession. Now, one day there will be a recession. There has to be, because these things are cyclical. But at the moment, it just isn't on the cards. And Wall Street liked that very much indeed. And of course, it comes just about 1 week and 4 days after we had the big shock of August the 5th, when the Nikkei fell by 12% on the Monday and was back up by 10% on the Tuesday. And the Dow, that Monday, just over a week ago, was down by more than 1,000 points. And that was concern about recession creeping into the U.S. economy. And now we know that it's not likely to happen anytime soon. So based on all of that, we have had a remarkable turnaround in the last 2 weeks. The S&P 500 in particular, an extraordinary turnaround, led today by Ulta Beauty, which is not a very well-known company. They have stores and they have websites. But Warren Buffett, Mr. Buffet, plowed millions of dollars of his own money into Ulta Beauty this week, and that really has lifted the S&P 500, and the other two are in the green as well. So the S&P is up at the moment by, well, just about 1 point, really, and the Dow is ahead by just 0.1%. Now, Mr. Director, I'm going to play the housing pictures now, so stand by with the housing pictures. because they would have been up more had it not been for some housing data that came out this morning. This is housing permits to build new houses, and housing starts. In other words, breaking ground on fallow ground at the moment, virgin ground, in order to build new houses. And they broke less ground than had been anticipated. So for those reasons, the markets are in the green at the moment, but they might have been far higher. And the University of Michigan gave us its sentiment survey this morning, and nothing had really changed. So what I'm saying is I think we could have had more green on the screen at the end of this week, but the housing market's rather hobbled from that.
So tons actually happening, and very quickly, if you could, what does that mean for that old saying about when to sell?
Yes, this is an old Wall Street saw. In fact, I'm feeling a bit sore myself this morning after playing squash with somebody here in Tribeca yesterday, but it's not that kind of sore. That's S-O-R-E. This is S-A-W, an old Wall Street saying, an old cliche. Go away in May. No, sell in May and go away. That's what it is. Sell in May and go away. And of course, it refers to the times when people on Wall Street could do that if they wanted to. The summer months are notoriously quiet, normally, and they would sell up in May, go to the Hamptons at the end of Long Island, spend the summer there, read the Wall Street Journal, Wall Street Times once a week, you know, whatever, and then they come back in September and start again. Well, you can't do that anymore because of the 24-hour social media society that we all live in. So it's a good job they didn't go away in May, because if they had, they would have missed the continuation of the AI build-up in the tech stocks. They would have missed all the excitement around August the 5th. And I think the uncertainty has not gone away. We've still got plenty to come. The VIX index, the volatility index, is down to 14 now. It was at 66 when the crisis happened back on August the 5th. So it's calm at the moment, but there's plenty of uncertainty surrounding the Fed, interest rates, inflation. The election has been upended. President Trump is discombobulated now. He doesn't know how to handle Kamala Harris. And, of course, we have two major conflicts going on as well. Nobody can time the market either. So the best way to invest, if you have any spare money, is to put it into something like an ETF or a fund that tracks the Dow or tracks the S&P 500 or tracks one of the sectors, and then don't look at it for years. And just to remind you, when I started doing this for this program, the Dow was at 18,000. It's now at 40,000. So I think that's the best way to go, don't you?
Thank you so much, John Terrett in New York there.
British retail sales rebounded in July, helped by summer discounts and major sporting events. Retail sales volumes rose 0.5% in July, following a fall of 0.9% in June. Increases in sales at department stores and sports equipment shops have boosted overall spending. A three-day strike at the world's largest copper mine in Chile has been called off after a deal was reached between management and unions. Workers downed tools at the BHP-owned Escondida mine on Tuesday, prompting global copper prices to rise. Union leaders are due to meet with workers to seek approval of this deal.
Austria is still heavily reliant on Russian gas. Around 80 to 90% of its supplies come from Moscow. That is despite Brussels calling for a phase out of Russian fossil fuels. Now, Austria's main gas supply could be switched off far more quickly than anticipated. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger reports.
Ukraine could soon end Russia's abundant natural gas flow to Austria. Kyiv's counter-offensive on Russian territory is dangerously close to Russia's pipeline to Central Europe.
In a war, not every shell hits the right position, and it's totally possible that the compressor station at Sucha gets damaged, and that would result in an immediate stop of the gas flow.
But a misled rocket is not the only way to stop Russia's gas supply. These pipelines are Austria's direct gas connection to Russia via Ukrainian territory. By the end of this year, Kyiv wants to end that partnership by not renewing its gas transition contract. This would mean no more cheap gas for Austria, but at the same time could be Vienna's easy way out of its billion-dollar obligations with Moscow. Austria currently gets between 80 to 90% of its gas from Russia. Contracts that were signed before the start of the Ukraine conflict legally bind Vienna's main energy company OMV to buy gas from Moscow until 2040, something Austria's government would like to change.
The goal is to chart a course that would enable Austria to basically stop buying gas from Russia. Austria is very well connected to other gas markets, to Italy, to Germany. So we would be able to replace Russian gas relatively easily.
But Italian gas and LNG are more expensive than Russian fuel. Price hikes would be likely, and critics say ending the contract with Moscow is impossible.
The most expensive outcome is if Austria unilaterally cancels the gas contracts. That would cost Austria 20 to 30 billion euros without us getting any gas in return due to these take-or-pay obligations.
No matter who or what stops the Russian gas flow, Austrian households and the country's industry will likely have to pay more. Johannes Bleschberger, CGTN, Vienna.
Gaurav Sharma is an independent energy analyst. Gaurav, welcome back to the programme. Well, I mean, how does Austria find itself in this situation after the EU dramatically reduced its reliance on Russian gas?
Good to be back on the programme. Good to see you. You see, this is a problem of the Austrians' own creation. They were warned as early as 2016, and there was no expanded conflict on the horizon. Russia had still annexed Crimea, but this was not on the cards. They didn't heed those warnings. Now, when the conflict broke, their neighbors and various other European nations turned to US LNG or imported LNG. Now, for Austria, it's a bit of a pickle. There is a dependency issue, as your colleague mentioned in his report, of almost 90% reliance on Russian gas. And then there is this whole conundrum of the Germans, who are the main gateway for LNG into Europe, charging them as a surcharge, which is almost 2 to 4 times over the market rate for importing it. So they got into this mess because they didn't heed to any of the warnings.
Hindsight is very useful, of course, but I mean, just how risky is over-reliance to this degree on a single source of energy, given these geopolitical circumstances?
Well, absolutely. You see, it has implications for the near neighborhood as well. This is Austria's problem in the main, but the domino effect will be sort of felt in Hungary and Slovakia as well. So it's all well and good that they're now saying that they're looking at discoveries, domestic natural gas discoveries. Those will take a long time to come on stream. In the meantime, if there is disruption, and it is an if, they'd be paying the Germans at least 3 or 4 times over to import that gas.
What are the realistic alternatives available then?
I see in the longer term, they have to work with their domestic partners, both in Northern and Southern Europe. But the problem there is that the European pipeline network, as it were, it's not as unbundled as it is, say, in the States. So that's basically meaning a separation of the producers and the transportation network. So they'll have to work more closely, and they will probably end up paying over the odds over the next 5 years. That said, you know, Ukraine is likely to watch out because it's very pro-West. That said, as your colleague said, an errant missile or rocket cannot be discounted in disrupting networks.
This 5-year agreement with the Russian state energy firm Gazprom to continue Ukraine's role as a gas transit route finishes at the end of this year, doesn't it? So what does that then mean for Europe?
I think for the 3 countries I mentioned, for Austria, Hungary and Slovakia, it is a big problem. They say that they're trying to mitigate it. The Slovakians issued a communique alongside the Austrians and Hungarians that they're trying to mitigate this. They haven't exactly spelled it out. And my hunch would be that they'll turn to the near neighborhood to try and import some gas indirectly from the LNG cargoes that are arriving on European shores.
Gaurav, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming back on the programme again. Gaurav Sharma, the independent energy analyst in London.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a Kremlin aide accuses NATO and the West of helping to plan Ukraine's Kursk incursion as Russia's offensive in Donetsk intensifies.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. A Kremlin aide has accused NATO and Kyiv's Western allies of being directly involved in planning Ukraine's incursion into Russia.
Washington has denied any involvement or knowledge of the advance, which is now in its 11th day. This all comes as Ukraine released footage of what it claims is the start of the incursion at the border. Meanwhile, Russia says its forces have destroyed Ukrainian military units in western Kursk. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova is in Moscow. Dasha, what's the latest on these Kremlin suggestions of Western involvement?
Well, Kremlin aide Nikolai Patrushev was quoted as saying in the Russian media as NATO countries and NATO intelligence must have been involved into the planning of this incursion by the Ukrainian military into Russia's Kursk region. He explained that NATO countries have been pumping Kyiv with weapons, military instructors, and have been constantly providing the intelligence information to the Kyiv authorities. He also has stressed that the statements of the United States that they had no prior knowledge of this incursion being planned by Kyiv is simply untrue. He said that Kyiv would have never attempted to do anything like that without the prior consent from Washington. And he said that even though Washington says it had no prior knowledge, it is very often the case that the U.S. is saying one thing and then in the end it is completely different in reality.
Yes, Russia saying it's continuing to repel Ukrainian attacks.
That's right. The Russian Ministry of Defense has confirmed that they were still fighting with the Ukrainian incursion, both on the Russian territory and also striking the positions of the Ukrainian military in the Sumy region, which is bordering Russia's Kursk region. In the meantime, evacuations have been ongoing. At least 400 people have been evacuated from the Kursk region over the past day, according to the Emergencies Ministry, and 10,000 people have been stationed in the temporary shelters in 19 different regions of the country. But while those evacuations have been taking place, we understand the fighting is ongoing, and two workers of one of the charity organizations that has been helping and facilitating the evacuations, they were killed as a result of the Ukrainian attack. Also, we've seen those attacks taking place in other regions. For instance, in Donbas, in the city of Donetsk, at least 11 people have been wounded as a result of the Ukrainian drone attack against the shopping center.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow.
Let's speak now to our correspondent Megumi Lim in Kyiv. Hello, Megumi. So Ukraine is saying its forces continue to push into Russia. It's also released this video that it says shows their very first day of the incursion. Into day 11 now. What do we know of the extent of Ukraine's troop activity in Russia?
Well, Ukraine's operation inside the Kursk region is still continuing, but so far today we've not seen any major Ukrainian advances inside Kursk. But today the Ukrainian military for the first time released a video which purportedly shows the early hours of the cross-border incursion into Russia's Kursk, which took place 11 days ago. The video shows Russian soldiers, tanks, armored vehicles rolling into the Kursk region, and also Russian soldiers being captured. Now, today is day 11 of the cross-border incursion, Kursk incursion, and Ukraine is saying that they've so far taken control of about 1,150 square kilometers of territory and more than 80 settlements. Today, Ukraine's Interior Ministry said Kyiv had set up a warehouse in the Sumy region, which borders the Kursk region, to store humanitarian aid and to transfer humanitarian aid to occupied areas of the Kursk region. So far, they're saying that about 150 food products have been transferred to residents living there. Now, yesterday, the Ukrainian commander-in-chief, Alexander Syrsky, said Ukraine also for the first time set up a military office in the occupied areas of the Kursk region. He's saying that the purpose of this office is to maintain order and also respond to the needs of residents there. So we are seeing Ukrainian forces digging in, and it looks like they're planning to stay for at least a while.
Ukraine, though, is facing challenges elsewhere. Tell us about that, Megumi.
Well, Russian forces are still advancing in Ukraine's eastern front in the eastern Donetsk region. We're hearing that Russian forces are getting closer to the city of Pokrovsk. This is a very important logistics hub for the Ukrainian army. And now we're hearing Russian forces have come as close as 10 kilometers from the city's outskirts. And authorities there are urging residents to leave. They're saying the situation is incredibly dire. And this is a city that Russian forces have been trying to capture for several months now. There's still intense fighting going on between Ukrainian and Russian forces, and also in neighboring Mirnograd. This is not far from Pokrovsk. Russian forces have come as close as 6 kilometers away from Mirnograd, and residents are evacuating there. Now, if Ukraine's objective with the Kursk incursion was to divert Russian troops and resources away from frontline areas in Ukraine's east, we're not yet seeing this happening. There's still intense fighting going on, and attacks have seemed to have intensified. So the big question is, what is Ukraine going to gain from their operation and incursion into Russia?
Thank you so much, Megumi Lim from Kyiv there.
Thailand's parliament has elected Paetongtarn Shinawatra as the country's youngest ever prime minister. The 37-year-old was elected by nearly 2/3 of the House, just 2 days after the sitting prime minister was dismissed by a constitutional court. She has never served in government before and is the daughter of the billionaire and former premier Thaksin Shinawatra.
Foreign ministers from China, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand and Vietnam have been meeting in the Thai city of Chiang Mai. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has been speaking at the talks. Our correspondent Chaurat Yongjirnon reports.
China's top diplomat Wang Yi says Beijing is prepared to support further development in the Langsang-Mekong region. This year, LMC members China, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam have held talks under the theme towards the shared future of a safer and sustainable Langsang-Mekong region. Foreign Minister Wang emphasized that all members are one big family facing shared challenges. He says the LMC still hasn't achieved its full potential in terms of building connectivity, managing resources, promoting biodiversity, maintaining food and energy security, and promoting technological innovation and tourism for people-to-people exchanges.
We think the impact of Lansang-Mekong cooperation is more prominent and has a significant impact on regional development. As the world is facing uncertainties, it's in the interests of LMC members to work together and address shared challenges.
In just 10 years, Chinese trade with Mekong countries has doubled as connectivity between China and the region has increased via rail routes, roads, and ports. Foreign Minister Wang emphasized the importance for LMC members to act like what he called bulldozers to narrow development gaps in ASEAN. Addressing the growing concern of cross-border crime, such as online scams, China promises to assist LMC members by accelerating innovation and technology, such as cloud innovation, to manage data and thwart scammers.
Together, we have reaffirmed that safety and security of our people are foundational to sustainable development, and that security can truly be achieved when prosperity is shared by all.
Referring to his talks with Myanmar, Foreign Minister Wang noted the importance of ASEAN's role as mediator for internal reconciliation within the country, adding that ASEAN would not be ASEAN without Myanmar. All sides agree the LMC has contributed to the benefit of all people within the region. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says that the success of the 9th LMC Foreign Ministers meeting proves that it is the perfect platform to promote multilateral cooperation and mutual trust. Looking ahead to the future, the LMC members say that they're confident that progress will be made together to address ever-changing challenges and promote resilience. CGTN, Chiang Mai, Thailand.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Gaza's ceasefire talks are to resume next week after the United States presents a revised proposal.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Sally Burdett. Our top stories: more positive economic data in the United States allays fears of a recession, but the housing sector still looks rather shaky.
And a Kremlin aide accuses NATO and the West of helping to plan Ukraine's Kursk incursion as Russia's offensive in Donetsk intensifies.
Negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza will resume next week after 2 days of talks in Doha.
This after Washington presented a revised proposal aimed, it says, at closing the remaining gaps. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv and joins us now. Hello, Jonathan. What more can you tell us about the progress of these ceasefire talks?
The progress depends on who you choose to listen to. If you listen to the mediators, being Qatar, Egypt, and mostly the United States, then progress has been made. It was even evident from a statement put out by President Joe Biden saying that things look better today than they looked 3 days ago. Other statements coming from the U.S. saying that more advance was made in these 2 days than in the previous 6 weeks. So if you ask the mediators, it seems as if progress was made, and that is why another follow-up summit is expected to take place next week in Cairo. We know that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to arrive here in Israel on Sunday and meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. So as far as the mediators are concerned, they're signaling that things are moving forward. If you listen to the statement coming out of the Prime Minister's office, the tone is somewhat different. That statement saying that Israel hopes that the mediators will be able to put pressure on Hamas to accept the proposed deal. So not exactly an optimistic message, but also not a pessimistic message, and not something saying that the talks are about to collapse. As far as Hamas is concerned, they're saying that the conditions put out today are different than the ones they agreed to on July 2nd, the previous time that they agreed to an outline. So Israel and Hamas both putting somewhat colder statements. As far as the mediators are concerned, they're saying that there has been progress, things have been advancing, and therefore there will be a follow-up summit. As far as they are concerned, a lot of optimism.
Meanwhile, we're hearing that Israeli settlers set fire to houses and cars in a village in occupied West Bank. What more can you tell us?
Yes, it happened on Thursday evening in a Palestinian village called Jit in the central northern West Bank. Some tens of Jewish youths came in. According to reports, there was a Palestinian killed, many others injured, and a lot of material damage. Many times in the past, in these cases, the politicians coming from the far right would perhaps find some justifications for these actions. Not this time. The entire political spectrum, including far-right ministers, including Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the far-right element in this government, all of them coming out against this action by Jewish settlers, all of them saying that these actions are nothing but damage to the settlement movement and actually to the entire state of Israel. We're hearing this, of course, from the center and the center-left, but also from right-wing elements, as we've said, also from Israeli President Isaac Herzog and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who put out a statement saying these are criminals, thugs, and that the elements of the law will be able to find them and prosecute them. It is quite rare to see such a consensus among the entire political spectrum, including far-right elements in the government. This is the case, though. Everybody condemning this act, people are saying, including people from the right-wing parties, saying that this is a disgrace to the settler movement, a disgrace to the state of Israel.
All right, thank you for that update. Jonathan Regev coming to us from Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Israel has ordered further evacuations in southern and central Gaza from what were previously seen as safe zones. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari is in Khan Yunis.
The most frequent question asked by the people who are frantically trying to find somewhere they would go to. The UNRWA described the whole situation. The UNRWA said that people are exhausted, people are desperate, people are worried, and I add to this that people don't have even the financial resources to afford all those frequent movements and displacement. In around 3 weeks, people had to move for around 5 times, and the last time now, people are moving from areas that were designated as a humanitarian zone to other areas, to the shrinking humanitarian zone in Hamad area, in Al-Qarara area, in Al-Mawasi area, and that also in Deir al-Balah area, in Gaza Central area, in Al-Birka area. People are growing desperate because of the fact they have been moving, they have been dismantling their tents, and whenever they're trying to move from one area to another, they would find that those areas are occupied by other people who have already moved because they were asked to move in the last few days. So people have nowhere to go, but they are forced to go. People understand they would be targeted because if they stayed in the areas that where they are asked to evacuate from, they will eventually be targeted by the Israeli forces. Like in Hamad City was deconflicted yesterday, and just today in the morning, people in Hamad City were asked to evacuate and leave the area. They were coming back to the area the day after yesterday, and they have to leave today. That leaves them in a profound state of confusion, anger, and helplessness as well.
Well, as we've reported, the death toll from Israel's 10-month offensive in Gaza is now above 40,000 people. Well over a third of those victims are children, while thousands more are thought to be missing or buried under the rubble. Tess Ingram is from the United Nations Children's Emergency Fund.
It really is another day for the mass movement of people, and it's hard to fathom how many times people have had to do this now. Over the last 10 months, we know some families that have moved a dozen times, every time more exhausted, every time with more injuries and less belonging. So it really is another really difficult day in Gaza. And on top of that, of course, we've heard of strikes in Gaza City in the north and in Al-Mawasi in the south, so the fighting continues, putting children's lives at risk.
UNICEF, of course, no stranger to having to deal with tragedy around the world. I mean, how would you quantify what's going on in Gaza?
We have described it for months now as the most dangerous place in the world to be a child, and we don't say that lightly. We say that because the situation in Gaza is horrific for children from all aspects, from the threat to their lives, the threat to their limbs, the threat to their minds, the threat to their health. We, of course, now have polio and other diseases ravaging the Gaza Strip. So it really is a dangerous place from all aspects. And we see that, Jamie, in the numbers. We see that in these casualty figures. But we also see it in, the aspects of their lives that aren't quantifiable, that we don't have numbers for, that we can only really understand through being on the ground, through hearing these children's stories and trying to understand what the situation is like for them.
This has been going on for 10 months now. Do you think it's possible to say what the long-term physical and emotional damage for children in Gaza might be?
Look, I think it's important for us to remember that every time when we talk about these numbers, that 1.1 million children in Gaza, thousands of children killed, that every one of those children is the world to somebody. And when they're lost or when they're injured or when they're suffering serious emotional distress, that this is a child who is part of a family who has either been lost or has to find a way to rebuild their lives. We estimate that every single one of those 1.1 million children is going to need mental health or psychosocial support, which is just enormous. And the capacity to do that in Gaza at the moment is limited, almost non-existent. And so as UNICEF, we're trying to do what we can, running recreational activities and a little bit of learning to try and give children some distraction and respite from the horrors around them. But once the guns fall silent, there's going to be an enormous job that needs to be done in helping these children move forward.
How would you assess the international community's assistance has been so far to the victims?
Look, I think assistance comes in many forms, and obviously, we can talk about aid. And while there has been aid sitting outside of the Gaza Strip, we know that not enough aid has been getting into the Gaza Strip. And I think that's not for a lack of international efforts. I think that's because of slow and complex screening processes, restrictions that have really prevented us from getting the aid that could save children's lives into Gaza and then distributing it around Gaza to everybody that needs it. But of course, international assistance is also advocacy, and it's also speaking loudly for a ceasefire. And in my mind, that absolutely has to continue, particularly now as these talks resume.
The UK is to start paying compensation to people who were given infected blood in the 1970s and 1980s. Payments will begin by the end of this year. Some victims could receive up to $3 million. Over 30,000 people were infected with HIV and hepatitis C after being given contaminated blood products, some of them under high-risk medical research programs. Around 3,000 people are known to have died.
Spain's Balearic Islands have been hit with record rainfall, leading to travel disruption, evacuations and serious flooding. Tourists returning home from Palma Airport in Mallorca were stranded, with flights in and out cancelled or delayed. In Menorca, thunderstorms left many areas without power as roads became submerged.
Japan has ordered thousands of people to leave home and cancelled hundreds of flights and trains as Typhoon Ampil bears down on Tokyo. The storm is set to reach coastal areas near the capital by Friday, although it's not expected to make landfall. Residents have been told to avoid rivers and beaches.
Hurricane Ernesto has strengthened to a Category 2 storm as it heads towards Bermuda, threatening serious damage. The storm could drench the Atlantic British island with 15 inches of rain that may result in life-threatening flash flooding.
The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has raised its risk alert for Mpox and urged travellers to consider vaccinations. A more deadly strain of the virus has been spreading in Africa, and one case has now been confirmed in Sweden. Health officials in Pakistan say they've detected at least one case of Mpox, although it's not clear whether it's the new variant. The virus is transmitted through close contact. Professor Salim Abdul Karim is an epidemiologist at Caprisa. He's also chair of Africa's CDC Emergency Consultative Group.
So I chair the committee of 20 scientists in Africa that advise the Director General of the Africa CDC. And we were asked to review all of the data. And when you look at the information currently available, there are four concerning things. The first is that we in Africa right now have substantially more Mpox infections than we had 2 years ago when the declaration was made of an international public health emergency of international concern. So we have many more cases right now than 2 years ago. But also concerning is that the number of cases are going up. So it's not that it's just flat or just similar, it's going up. The third is that we are seeing a case fatality rate. That's the proportion of patients who have the infection who then die as a result. And we're dealing right now with a case fatality rate of around 3%. And that's much higher than we anticipated we would see. But the other concern is that in the last few weeks, 3 more countries in Africa started reporting cases of Mpox. And these were countries that didn't have Mpox before. And all 3 of them have the same variant, the same clade 1b, that is spreading in the DRC.
Of course, we've also heard that in Europe, Sweden has confirmed a case of Mpox of this new variant, the clade 1b, which, as you say, is of more concern. And immediately, of course, we think of those terrible times of COVID. We think of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. But there's a key difference with Mpox. There is a vaccine. It's derived from the smallpox vaccine. Does that mean we're safe? And does that mean we should scale up the vaccines very quickly?
So one of the distinguishing features of the situation in the DRC right now, and that's in the South Kivu region of the DRC, is that we are seeing a transmission that's occurring heterosexually. In other words, where couples are passing the virus from one to the other. And when they interact with children, they're then spreading it to children, who are then, because they play amongst themselves, are spreading it within the children. So what we are seeing in the DRC is a situation of a virus that is sexually transmitted, but also transmitted through contact with children. And so that's what's driving this epidemic situation in the DRC. Now, to slow the spread of Mpox is not a big challenge. You do it with basic public health measures. That means case identification. Every case where you identify that there's a patient with Mpox, you've got to ensure that you isolate them, that you trace all of their contacts, people they live with, their sexual partners, and you ensure that they don't spread it onward. So that's how you control it. A vaccine could be a very valuable addition to those public health measures.
How confident are you that if we need to, we can scale up these vaccines?
But once we know that these vaccines are clinically efficacious, we really need to do much, much more to scale them up and to make them available, particularly in settings where we're facing real challenges in implementing public health measures. I mean, the problem in the DRC is not just that you got this virus spread, it's spreading in a part of the country that is politically unstable. They are in a war zone. And so we can't even get the samples from the patients to the lab to do the testing. So there needs to be a political solution, there needs to be a public health solution, and there needs to be a technological solution with vaccines in addition to all of that.
Well, staying with that story, shares in Bavarian Nordic, which makes the Mpox vaccine, have surged following the spread of the new strain. Its stocks are up by around 18% after the WHO declared a global health emergency and Europe raised its risk alert. The Danish pharmaceutical company says it's ready to produce up to 10 million doses of its vaccine by 2025.
Dengue fever is taking hold across Europe, the world's fastest warming continent. It's spread by tiger mosquitoes, and in the decade between 2010 and 2021, only 71 cases of locally acquired dengue were reported across the EU. But just last year alone, 130 people caught the disease. Tiger mosquitoes were previously only found in tropical areas. They're now in 13 European countries: Austria, Bulgaria, Croatia, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Malta, Portugal, Romania, Slovenia and Spain. Our correspondent Rhea Al-Salahi went to meet scientists in France who are trying to stop the spread of the disease.
Across the world, there are over 3,500 species of mosquito. Most are harmless, but some are capable of spreading dreadful diseases like malaria. The tiger mosquito and its fellow partner in crime, the Aedes aegypti, have developed a reputation for spreading a different disease, dengue. Once confined to tropical areas, the tiger mosquito is now on the increase in European countries like France.
Oh, that's a baby mosquito wriggling around in your hand. Why is this happening here in France?
Climate change will improve habitat suitability. Some places that were not suitable to the mosquitoes will turn out to be suitable.
The tiger mosquito, what makes that particular type of mosquito of such concern?
It's the only mosquito that is able to transmit viruses such as dengue, chikungunya, Zika and even yellow fever. The female gets infected by biting someone who has the virus in his blood, then it can transfer the virus to another person. Before the Asian tiger mosquito was there was no threat for this kind of disease transmission in Europe. Now it's here and it's growing.
One organisation is pioneering an intervention using the mosquito itself to stop the disease.
Wolbachia is this very interesting bacteria that lives inside insects. When an insect or mosquito in particular has Wolbachia in its body, certain viruses can't replicate, but it doesn't make the mosquito sick. They don't make people sick, the Wolbachia. They're really common naturally in the environment.
And it's this that you're tapping into with the Wolbachia method. What is that?
We grow mosquitoes that contain Wolbachia and we release them into the environment. They mate with wild mosquitoes and pass the Wolbachia into the mosquito population. And at that point, people don't get sick anymore because viruses can't be transmitted to people.
The World Mosquito Programme now operates in 14 countries, and it's estimated the mosquito releases they've made so far have protected over 11 million people. Brazil has seen the largest number of dengue cases ever, with over 1.5 million so far. The World Mosquito Programme has teamed up with the Brazilian government to upscale production of Wolbachia-infected mosquitoes.
On one side of the harbour you see Rio de Janeiro, and then it just continues into a neighbouring city called Niterói. So we deployed our method into Niterói almost fully and not much into this actual municipality of Rio de Janeiro. At the end of February this year, Rio de Janeiro had reported 17,000 cases of dengue. Niterói, where we deployed, had recorded 69 cases. And so, you know, it's real-world evidence of the impact we're having in being able to reduce disease.
And whilst the numbers compared to countries like Brazil are still small in Europe, experts believe dengue is a very real threat to an increasing number of countries around the world, including those in Europe.
We need solutions. We probably need the solutions for the developing world in the tropics more urgently. But it's coming to a town near you really soon.
That was Scott O'Neill, the CEO of the World Mosquito Programme, ending that report by our correspondent Rhea El-Salahi.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a deep dive into an environmental story. We're going to be finding out about a giant panda mum who's given birth to twins.
You're never too old to become a mum, apparently.
Absolutely.
As we're about to find out in a couple of minutes.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw. The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. With electric car sales on the rise, there are concerns that power grids could become overwhelmed at peak times.
China's BYD is now part of a pilot project that aims to fix that problem with a new type of charger. Our correspondent Michael Voss reports.
Charging an electric or EV car at home is a one-way process. Until now, manufacturers are starting to develop two-way chargers. This would allow people to charge their cars at night when costs are low, then use the car's battery to power appliances at home during the day, or even sell energy back to the grid at higher rates. China's BYD is a relative newcomer to the UK market, but globally it's overtaken Tesla as the largest EV manufacturer. All the models at this showroom have two-way chargers, although only the top ranges come with the necessary reverse cable. They're marketing it as a useful camping accessory.
So this is one of these two-way cables? That's correct. So that's the vehicle-to-load cable, which comes with our BYDs, and that will power the energy through to a cool box. So if you decided to go camping, ideal for that, and even a speaker.
Now Kraken, the software division of the energy giant Octopus Energy, has teamed up with BYD and others to look at how best to utilise these two-way chargers. The work is centred at the company's new research and development green energy super hub based at Manchester University.
An EV car could power a house for up to 3 to 5 days. So imagine when there isn't wind or sun, we would have charged the batteries on those EVs to enable the home run on them when we don't have the sun and wind.
In early August, Kraken invited its software engineers from around the world to see the new facility and compare notes on progress.
Most of the technology is already available because it's going to take several years before there's enough electric cars on the road to make a significant impact.
There are around 35 million cars on the road in the UK. Just 1 million of them are all electric. Projections say this could grow to 10 million by 2035 and 30 million by 2050. This would require vast amounts of electricity to charge them. Being able to give some of that power back when needed could ease the burden.
So the technology is there. We just need to make it scalable and more economical. So if we look at solar went from $100 plus per megawatt hour to $30 per megawatt hour. With vehicle-to-grid technologies, a few years ago it would have cost £5,000 to get a charger for it. We need the cost to go down to enable it.
Like many new technologies, there are many different models of home chargers. Work is now underway to compare them and develop the software needed to power homes while leaving enough energy in the car battery for daily use. Michael Voss, CGTN, Manchester.
And finally, one very tired mother in Hong Kong is having a well-earned rest after the arrival of newborn twin giant pandas. Yin Ying gave birth at Ocean Park just a day before she turned 19. Now, that is the equivalent of being 57 in human years. The older mum panda birth is being described as a true rarity by the chairman of the theme park.
To be fair, she looks exhausted, doesn't she? I mean,
Can't blame her.
Who can blame her? Absolutely. The headlines again, more positive economic data in the United States allays fears of recession, but the housing sector still looks rather shaky.
A Kremlin aide accuses NATO and the West of helping to plan Ukraine's Kursk incursion as Russia's offensive in Donetsk intensifies.
And a pause in the peace talks. Washington offers a revised ceasefire plan for Gaza, with the negotiators saying they'll meet again next week.
And that's all for Global Business Europe. Thanks so much for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.